Good evening. It's Tuesday, February 10th at 7:30 p.m. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Darien Board of Finance to order. First item on the agenda is always public comment. I don't think we have any public comment tonight. So we'll move on to, we have one transfer and a couple action items. So first, Josh, if you want to take us through the request to transfer $18,516 to various part-time salary accounts.
Sure, so this is a transfer that was put together by the Human Resources Director and the Town Administrator. It's a transfer from the employee salary set aside into various part-time salary accounts throughout Town Hall. So what this transfer represents is an increase for 17 permanent part-time positions. This is kind of a one-time catch-up of on average about 15% of an increase for 13 of those 17 roles. The 4 roles that are left out have more of are technical in nature, and they're appropriately kind of salaried as such. This really was studied to kind of take a look at how wage compression has kind of held them behind their full-time salary counterparts, and kind of as minimum wage in the state creeps up, they're getting kind of closer and closer to those seasonal employees. So what this transfer accomplishes is it shifts the range that's currently $19.86 to $26.56 per hour, and then shifts it to $22.84 to $30.54 an hour. I know the majority are not on that top step. There's kind of a matrix that's used to determine where within that range they fall. So most are kind of towards the middle of that. So as I said, Connecticut minimum wage is just approaching $17, it's 16.94. And so we kind of pay, I believe, our seasonal employees a couple dollars above the minimum wage, so this kind of pushes the permanent part-time positions forward a little bit more. I'd also kind of like to highlight that these are year-round staff members who are not eligible for town pension or matches in their 401s or medical or dental benefits either. So this represents kind of from now until the end of the year, that amount necessary for this, and baked into the FY27 budget, there's $40,000 and change that kind of is put into the salary set aside, salary contingency line, that will be used and spread across the various departments if and when it's approved. I would also like to kind of point out that after this increase takes place, they'll follow kind of every year kind of the normal salary review and increase that the normal full-time salary employees are.
Is any of this retro, or this is all just for
as far as I know, this is just from now forward.
Is this responding to concerns expressed by those individuals, or is this
No, I don't
proactive
think so. I think it was
addressing?
I think it was a study done by the HR department. I think it's been something that's they've been wanting to look at for a while. They had done like a full-on salary survey a couple of years ago, and I don't think that really took into account part-time salary. And there were some corrections that took place at that point, and I think this is kind of focusing in on those people. The finance department has one that we rely on heavily, and they're kind of, they do great work, as do many in town hall. So this kind of brings them more in line with the actual tasks that they accomplish and what we're asked, like what we ask of them essentially.
So how was it not handled this way in the past? Why? It seems like a policy change as well as a financial decision.
It is somewhat, I think, to at least be a little more focused on maintaining that kind of ongoing growth of it instead of having several years of stagnation and a catch up like this. I can't speak to why the policy was the way it was previously.
So does this become part of their regular review? Like they're now going to be taking into account what part-time salaries or part-time hourly rates are doing? Instead of, like, to your point,
In
you
salary
wanna do
studies
it-
going forward?
yeah, like going forward, so
I
it's
believe
gotta be.
so. I'm not sure if there's some nuance to the timing of one or the other.
But we're not expecting like 3% increase in this rate every year, right?
In their salary?
Yeah, like
Well,
in the rate that they're,
in their hourly rate.
in the hourly rate.
So I would say that they.
So one time, it's a catch-up, but now are we
It's a catch up and then,
building in?
you know, I think it's planned to kind of follow how full-time salaries also have a progression based on inflation and peer towns and so on. I don't think salary studies like this are done yearly or even every other year. I think they're kind of slightly infrequent. But this kind of reinforces the continuing effort to kind of keep that in line with kind of where in the scale between minimum wage and seasonal and full-time, and have them kind of situated properly in the middle there.
But Josh, just to, like, our budget is an annual review of all the non-unionized, let's call it exempt salaried
Sure.
full-time employees. So every year they get a couple percent
Sure.
of an increase, right? And obviously, the 6 different unions that we have on this side also have that sort of baked in. This was just something that, when they went out and they did the full-time study, I think it was 12 months ago, right, of all the full-time staff and not some of the elected positions, they didn't do anything on the part-time.
I don't think they did, no.
So,
But to be clear, these individuals would still get annual increases. This is just a catch-up.
Correct.
Yeah.
So this kind of sets
Yeah.
them on that,
Yeah.
I think Jen last night at Board of Selectmen said it just to it makes us more competitive. I think they were starting to see people leave, Dan, and they just kind of did a whole review of everything, and we were just, I think we were under market, and I think to Jim's point, or Jen, whoever said it, we probably need to look at this more often than, you know, to me, it's just part of your annual review, right?
Yeah.
Like, where are we with these salaries? Are we competitive? I think the state hourly is going to 17 almost, because if it's minimum 17 and some of the folks who are at 19,
Yeah.
you start kind of,
yeah.
you know, I'll just go,
Yeah, if it's 1 or 2 on the camp counselors, $1 or $2 over minimum for the camp counselors, and these are like full-time employees, or part-time, permanent part-time, you know, it's, yeah.
Okay.
So I'll entertain
Yep.
even though these are each below 5,000, we're still gonna.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's one, well, it's from a contingency line, so it'll be voted on anyway.
Okay, so I'll accept a motion to transfer $18,516 to various part-time salary accounts. Rob moves, Jenny seconds, all those in favor? Unanimous. So that's it for the transfers. We have 2 discussion items tonight. One is where we don't necessarily need to take action, but maybe begin to think about giving a little bit of guidance in terms of which way we're pointed. And then there's the request for the appropriation on Great Island. John was gonna come down and talk to us a little bit about the Great Island appropriation, so I kinda gave him, I suggested sometime between now, 7:40 and like around 8, for him to come down. So what I would say is, let's turn to the bonding to get ready for the April issue. I thought, Josh, it made sense to maybe talk about this in 2 pieces, like what we need to borrow, kind of run through the project list to make sure we all understand what's been appropriated, what's been spent, what's coming down the pipeline. And then we can, once we make our way through that conversation, we can then pivot to like, what are we thinking about in terms of bonding, 30-year, 20-year amortization, and so forth.
Sure. So, I've been working with Mark Chapman recently, and right now we're targeting April 2nd as our kind of date for the sale, and April 23rd for the close. The plan right now, Mike just sent out maybe a half hour, an hour ago with the review schedule for this year's budget for the Board of Finance review. And in there, March 3rd is his plan to kind of come in and meet with the board and talk over any more in-depth questions that you may have based on sizing and structure and so on. And at that point, he'll have produced various scenarios based off of our discussions now and any questions that you may have between now and then. And then on the 10th, there'll be the vote by the Board of Finance related to sizing and kind of structure of that debt.
And Josh, just so everyone's aware, I mean, the date that's governing this, our bands, the $49 million of the bands mature on April 23rd.
Yep.
So we need to have that sort of priced, closed, and money in the bank to be able to
Yeah.
repay that, because it
Yeah.
is 49 plus
Yeah.
change, and that's more than, or
More than
what I was
half.
running thin
Yeah.
on cash.
Yes, it is. So there's a couple attachments that are a part of this, the first being kind of the list that we're looking at for borrowing. The second is a cash flow for HHR. And the last are a couple pro formas that were initially put together when we were putting together the budget for FY27. Depending on what we decide to bond or ban for, that completely changes, so they're really just the initial looks at these things. The more in-depth pro formas that go into kind of long-term debt will come later after we kind of put together a general idea of the direction. So on the second page, or the first attachment, the list of projects that we're kind of looking at. So the original plan was to bond for Great Island and likely to bond for 37 West, since those both fall under 30-year terms for their bond issues, and then to ban kind of for the rest, since those all fall under 20-year term issues. But I've heard that that may not be potentially what is, well, I guess you wanted to talk about the projects individually beforehand. Starting at the top, the Great Island Access, that is the 49 million ban that we have, less the amount of underspend that Ed has talked about, has mentioned in the financials. That's about 3.5 million or so that he says we can safely kind of not bond for, essentially. HHR.
And guys, just maybe just to point everybody to that left-hand number where it says 91.7, right? We all approved sort of 103 and change, but we raised that first time 91.7 million of proceeds, right? So.
And then ultimately, we ended rescinding the difference.
Well, yes, so we
Right.
we rescinded the authorization.
Right.
Well, I should say the appropriation and authorization from 103 down to 91.
Yeah.
And you can see in the 7th column here, we've only spent 88 and change. So there's about 3.7 million that we haven't used. I don't think we've really touched that in a long time, because I think the spirit of everything that we all kind of locked arms about a year and a half ago and said anything new that we're doing, furniture, roads, parking, all that type of stuff would be sort of a new authorization. And so in talking with John, like this 3.7, we have the cash. We can remove this authorization. And I've asked John if by the time we go to market, we could have this sort of simultaneously freed up, that we could apply that 3.7 that we already raised to something else.
So just another way of saying the 6.5 that we earmarked for basically stage 1 or phase 1 or whatever, just getting the island ready, turned into 2.8. Because it's 3.7 less than what we had
Yeah.
earmarked.
So it's basically 23A plus some other little things that they've been
Yeah,
using.
so it's less than half of what we had earmarked, is what was actually needed.
Correct, and if you remember, that was meant to cover sort of the purchase of the traffic circle, the
Yeah.
easements.
And it did all that.
Yeah,
but at far less than what was expected.
Yeah, I think remediation was really the biggest savings there, on the financials.
We also had
negotiated.
negotiated 23A, right? So I think at the time we earmarked the 6.5, so that was.
Yeah.
Right.
The traffic circle we had to go.
Yeah.
So just, you know, there is like 3.7 that we'll have and be able to use and apply to something else that qualifies for 30 years.
So technically, as far as my understanding is, we bonded for, so the authorization was brought down to the 91 million. We bonded for 42.7 million. We banned for the remaining 49 million. So that 49 million is in a ban and coming due in April. So once that ban comes due and we repay the 49 million, essentially, we're going to be repaying it from the bond proceeds of 46.75 million and the unspent 3.5 million that is from remediation and that it hasn't spent yet. So that 3 point something million won't really be available for spend on anything.
No,
It'll
it's
be
just
spent.
It'll be a source of funds.
It'll be
Yeah.
like cash proceeds essentially as a
So
source.
lower the amount of bonds we need to refinance.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
Yep. So I guess if we're just jumping straight down the line all the way to 37 West, that is 5.2. So far spent was 5.14. We're probably gonna reallocate some preliminary work to make that 5.2 whole. I think there's some like legal work and evaluation, preliminary P&Z style work that can be allocated to the asset itself. So that'll be made whole by that point. And those are the two that really fit under the 30-year. Going
And
down.
that's because it's, because it's land?
Yeah.
It's land, yeah, okay.
HHR is a tricky one. They're planning an underspend. As far as I know right now, it's of about 1.5 million or so each, or 1.15 million each. So it's about a net savings of about 3.4 million on the whole project. They're expecting to get about 7 million in grant revenue at some point.
Per school, right?
Per school,
Right.
yeah. So, which is about the price of a school between the three of them. I think it's a 20.1% reimbursement rate that they're getting. And you know, the tricky thing is timing. You know, if we got the grants tomorrow and the underspend happened tomorrow, we'd be pretty close to good. But we can't really count on that, and cash flow, as outlined below, it's gonna put us, you know, under what we have. So putting that in a ban until we kind of, you know, since HHR is kind of coming online quite soon and the last payments are happening in July, we'll have that kind of final number of what we need and a better idea, a couple more months of experience in terms of what the grants coming in from the state, and then hopefully we'll be able to kind of next year know what the differential is and what we should actually be bonding long-term debt for. Coming down Ox Ridge, there was 10,000 in there initially that got removed because I believe there's the final grant that we're going to be receiving from the state pending their kind of final audit of the project. I believe I heard about 200,000. Jen believes she heard about 70,000. So let's split the difference. It's somewhere in that range that's expected to come back, assuming they approve of assuming all the purchases and expenses kind of pass their audit essentially, and they release those funds. So that'll be made whole, and then probably some of the bond proceeds will be transferred from Ox Ridge into another project to make that up.
How much, what is that number? Is that,
The 10,000.
Okay.
It's just 10,500. So
and what is the total of the numbers between HHR that we were?
going to borrow in the ban?
Yeah.
So what is that, about 6.5 million or so? It's the 1 million, the 1.1, 1.8, and 3.6.
I had like 6.7.
Oh, you're adding them together. Yeah.
And we have a cash, remind me, what does a cash surplus represent?
So
That's
the
how much cash we have left from the bond proceeds?
Correct, yeah.
Or band proceeds?
Yeah. No, so the HHR is a bond proceeds, yeah. Yeah. And so, right, if you're looking at their cash surplus, following it down to, as they spend through July, it's about between 4 and 6 million, or 5 and 6 million each of them. So it cuts it down pretty close. Again, it all depends on the grant timing, and this kind of just keeps its head above water a little bit.
But I guess if we issue these bonds in April, then bands, and we issue 1-year bands, then we're kind of stuck with them paying interest for a year.
We are. So that's one of the groups that, if it's decided to go in a ban, we can kind of like fine tune the numbers. Even in a month from now, as we get closer to March, and closer to the vote on when we have to actually decide the number, we'll have more of the expenses in, potentially more of the grant money in, and this number can kind of come down to match a break-even point that's kind of a comfortable level.
When do we expect to get grants?
It's a good question.
I mean, when have we historically, like?
Well, in Oxbridge, there were 2 payments, but there's no,
So we have.
there's like a multi-year look back.
So we have
Because
started
the
to-
audits on some of these things take years.
We have started to get grants already. I'll flip for you so you don't have to find it, but in the financials, we've gotten 2.6 for Hinley, 1.1 for Holmes, and another 2.5 for Royal. So there's some lag and some catch up. They were, I think, filing quarterly, and sometimes they kind of just take a little bit.
So I think the Oxbridge, the final grant payment from the state on Oxbridge, we didn't receive until after the project was
No, so
completed.
we're waiting for it now.
And we're still, well, yeah, so,
So it takes a while.
yes,
That's
it
why I
can take a while.
That's why I think Josh on that page 2 you didn't put any grant money in here, because we don't know. Because what I think it entails, and Dan probably knows this a little better than I do, is grabbing like all the invoices, right? Putting them in a package in a certain format that the state needs, and then submitting it, and I think Josh is right,
So-
almost on a quarterly basis, and then,
Page 2.
yeah.
So page 2, total revenue expected, 5th column or 6th column. That's how much we expect to get in grant revenue from the state.
Right.
It's not
Yeah,
really factored into.
We're thinking of 21 million out of the 101. We were thinking roughly 20%, because there's also, not all your expenses are what's called grant eligible.
Yeah.
So we gotta strip those out, right? I think we've gone through this when Dan did it, right? We all learned, and now I'm learning the same thing, right? But there's definitely a methodology to doing it, which I go back to what I was saying. I appreciate on page 2, not putting any grant money in there. If you're doing a straight cash flow and, until the end of this thing in August, because at this point, we're spot on to go in August.
Yeah.
But the money trails behind.
And I wish I had it attached, I had gotten kind of an anticipated grant reimbursement schedule, at least from now until we issue, and there is likely to be another few million coming in, but it's, it can be delayed a month or 3 months, and you don't.
If we don't have it by the 23rd of April, then it doesn't matter if we get it on May 1st or
Right.
August 1st.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
And there's no shorter term option?
That's what I was trying to figure out.
Is there a 6-month ban?
That's well,
There are shorter bands that people issue.
Yeah.
They just,
We'd have to issue a smaller bond to refinance it.
but it's when you'd have to issue it,
Right.
right? So the
Yeah.
problem is, we could be stuck having to issue, if we did the 6-month,
Yeah.
issue in October, right?
Yes, that's my point. And it'd be a smaller bond than it would otherwise be if we waited a year.
Yeah. And maybe ask about
Less
shorter
efficient.
bonds, and typically, shorter bands, and typically bands are non-callable.
right.
But maybe just ask, what would something look like if there was a 12-month ban with a 6-month?
So I know one of the things
With a
I
6-month call.
I was talking to Mark about when we were kind of discussing combining into one bond issue or just different structures. For an issue, for a bond issue to be attractive, bigger is usually better. So if you have a small bond issue for like 5 million or 10 million, it may not be as easy to sell. But that may be just another thing to consider for deciding.
They want to call protection.
Yeah. So we ask about tenor and callability on the bands.
There's gonna be a cost to it, but we should know what the cost is. It might be worth it. I'm not sure it's feasible, but if it is.
It's a question to ask.
Right.
Regardless. Do you want to pause?
Yeah, why don't we pause, because we'll have to go through a few more projects here, right? And we'll skip to Great Island. Everyone
Sure.
good? Sure. So next item is discussion, take action on request for an appropriation and bond authorization for contract design drawings and related planning design services for Great Island initial access.
Jerry? I'll bring the lamb home.
Okay, so this goes back to the Board of Finance decision to table a proposal from the Board of Selectmen with regard to next steps on Great Island as a review. What was proposed at that time was what was called the early access investment for Great Island. And in that project, there were, I guess, a few major pieces of work. That included the construction of bathrooms in the root cellar outside the greenhouse. It included restoration of some meadows, clearing out invasives, a number of investments in pathway improvements, material improvements in those pathways, as well as parking infrastructure, which included changes to the northern causeway to create a 2-lane road, creation of some new roads that would circulate among the parking areas that were identified, and stuff related to parking like access gates, ADA parking, bicycle racks, all that sort of thing. So what we heard from the Board of Finance from that decision was that it was too much, to use a word. The big part that was too much was the bathrooms, which were fairly significant. A view that was really something that we could defer or reconsider, as well as other aspects of that project. But we did hear loud and clear that the board wanted parking. I think that's actually a conclusion that the general public has. We need to get parking onto Great Island, and we need to get it out there as soon as possible. So what's been done, and I wanted to stop a moment and do a shout out to Monica, as well as Dan Kolakowski and Jeff Table. Monica chaired the Great Island committee, as well as, and Jeff and Dan were both part of that committee. They spent an inordinate amount of time helping rethink the access plan so that we curtailed it down to really just focus on parking, which I'll get to in a minute. But they spent a lot of time on this, nights, weekends, vacation time, and I just wanted to personally thank Monica, as well as Jeff and Dan for that effort. It was much appreciated. So I pulled together a few pages today, and let me just flip through this. The first page shows you basically the locations of what we're talking about in terms of the revised plan. You can see on here vehicle gates. Those are really to keep the vehicles just in this parking area and to keep the rest of the island sort of vehicle-free. Town staff would be able to activate those gates to get through, as would emergency personnel, but the general public would not pass those gates, which would be up there on the northern causeway and at the entrance to the southern causeway. We'll have gravel parking, which will be, call it 50 to 60 parking lots, and that's marked in the areas shown in B, like Bravo. We'll have overflow parking, which will just be in the grassy area that's marked in Area C. There's a drop-off area for people to be dropped off deep into the island there. Americans with Disabilities access parking up at E that you see at the top out of the northern causeway. And of course, bicycles and bicycle racks. So this just gives you a visual of the area that's being planned. I would point out that this is the identical parking plan that was in the Great Island Committee master plan. So we've not changed any of that. All we've done is said we're going to focus on just the parking that was, and really the few related things like bike racks that was envisioned in that plan. So to be clear, and just to put it on paper, the second page has the scope of design services that we're looking at here, what's included and what's been dropped. So it's worth taking a moment to explain what's been done. So normally, when we do construction work, not normally, but always, we will always put that work out to bid. For consulting services, the town's purchasing plan does not require that, and 999 times out of 1,000, we simply go out and we pick a consultant to do work. This is the same type of work that was envisioned here, which is a consultant. And as you recall, when I described Great Island work before, and this applies to the Wheat Beach project, Pear Tree Point, you really need to break that into two phases. There needs to be an initial phase that does design work, schematics, drawings, and construction bid documents. And once all that work is done, the bid documents are what then goes out to a construction firm to actually get the work done. We followed that process with HHR, we do it with our schools. That's a common practice. Normally a consultant will come out and do that work for you, and you don't need to put that out to bid because it's design services and consulting work. But in this case, we decided to do that. The reason to do it was to pressure test Reed Hildebrand, to be quite honest. There's been a lot of questions about that work, particularly the costs that they had for their services in the proposal that had the bathrooms that we did before. So we decided to put that work out to bid. And what you're seeing on page 2 is a quick summary. The full list is in the appendix, the last page. It gives the full description of what was in the RFP, and that's the request for proposal that we sent out to the consultants. But what's here, and the reason I put this here, was just make sure that it's clear to this group that we are talking parking, and that if there's anything else on here, it's a few things that we need to attach to that. So we need to have ADA accessible parking. We might as well have bike racks. Their incremental cost is not that much. We need a drop-off zone. We've got to fix the northern causeway and make that a 2-lane road. We're going to have to modify the traffic circle a little bit. We need a small visitor road to link the parking, and we need to have drainage and wastewater or stormwater management. The only other thing that we've included in there is utility conduits. Our plan is not to use those utility conduits for any future immediate investment on Great Island. That's not the point. The point is simply to put the conduits there so that if a future board decides to do that, we don't have to rip these roads up. The conduits are in place. The incremental cost of that is not much. It's a prudent thing to do. Importantly, on the right, and to be clear, what has been dropped from this, we are not pursuing a welcome center. We're not doing restrooms. We're not doing a forecourt or gathering space. There's no meadow restoration. There's no invasives removals. And we're not doing all the other minor accessibility improvements. We're just focusing on parking and a few other essential things we think we should combine with that. So parking, some essentials, nothing more. Page 3 has a scoring matrix that the team developed with my participation. And we got bids for this consulting work from 4 companies. You'll recognize all of these perhaps except for Land Tech. Time Bond was the most expensive proposal, and given the cost there, we did not do a deep dive on trying to assess them. But the others we did, so it was Reed Hildebrand, Redness and Mead, and a company called Land Tech that's got a few companies that was part of their proposal. But what we tried to do here was a consultant scorecard where we would come in and assess the proposals based on a few criteria that we thought were important. One obviously was the proposal fee, but some other important things were things like the quality of their proposal, their overall creativity and flexibility, how fast they could deliver the project. There was actually quite a bit of variability in that, and we think that cost and time to delivery for parking are probably the 2 most important factors. We also put down some metrics around project team experience, familiarity with the town, and our approval processes and all that. You can read what we have here, but basically against that scoring matrix, which we tried to do as objectively as possible, you can see how the scores shake out against the maximum total points there on the left. Based on the team's assessment, and I concurred with this, Overall, the conclusion was that Reed Hildebrand was the company to go with for the reasons that you can see here, with a score of 95. Next was Redness, and then last was Landtech. Now, last night, what the Board of Selectmen did was we looked at the proposals, we looked at Reed Hildebrand, and we looked at the total cost that was included in the bond resolution. You can see that on page 4. What that included was Reed Hildebrand's cost for doing this work, but also a few other things, including a 10% contingency, $50,000 for really a pre-construction manager, which is someone that comes in and helps a process, a design process, start to link up with what's going to have to be done with construction. Some town consulting work, $10,000 of which was going to be used for a repeat traffic study, the last one being done in 2023, as well as a contingency amount for attorney's fees. So on reflection today and talking to a variety of folks, you could really consider all of those expenses there with the exception of bond fees, which we're going to have to pay to bond this. The 10% contingency, obviously, but also the construction manager, town consultants, attorney's fees. We don't actually have something that says we need to spend money on that right now. Those, in a way, are contingencies. We expect to be doing some of this. We expect to have some attorney's fees. But in the spirit of giving you all a look at this and getting additional eyes on it, what we've decided to do is strip those out. And what we will do is if there's even $1 over to this, we will come back to the Board of Finance for a small amount. Hopefully you can take that out of your Board of Finance contingency. And same for these other things. If we get sued, I will come see you. If we need to do the traffic study, I will come see you. But the main point is, the only thing we're looking for in this appropriation request and bond resolution is just what's required to hire Reed Hildebrand and what's going to be required to bond this, nothing else. If we're going to do anything else, we will come to this board and ask you for money. So further to that, on page 5, we did some modifications to section 1 of the bond resolution. And you can see the original language up there, which I've got in track changes, and the clean version. What it basically does is says, instead of saying we have a bond resolution to fund improvements in Great Island, we took the time to go through it and write down and pull language essentially from the RFP that says we are specifically doing these things. So it will give you further confidence that the money we're borrowing for this phase of work is only and specifically focused on these things. And even the bond resolution itself precludes us from spending the money on other stuff. So what I did with the Board of Selectmen tonight was I presented this document in a more abbreviated form. And we actually voted and amended our Board of Selectmen resolution from last night. So what we've now approved at the Board of Selectmen level about 45 minutes ago is actually the dollar amount that you see on page 4. So we've stripped all this out, and what we're asking you all for is a bond resolution for $475,402 instead of the $617,250. And we're also proposing and have approved at the Board of Selectmen level the clean language in section 1 of that bond resolution, which is where really the meat of the resolution is. The rest of it's administrative language. So let me stop there. Again, we've approved a bond resolution and recommended it to you all for this phase of work, and have tried to clean it up in a way that reflects some concerns and questions that I've heard various members of this board have had. So I'll stop there and be happy to answer any questions.
On page 6, I think if I read that, that's basically the brunt of what was asked for in the RFP that we sent out,
This is a copy of, or a couple words here and there, but basically a copy of the scope of design services that we requested those consultants to bid back to us on. So what I did on that page is I just simplified it from my page 2 to make it an easier for discussion, but for completeness, the appendix has got it all.
I don't have a question, I just applaud the work.
Yeah.
And the original request that we got kind of in the latter part of last week was directly responsive to the concerns we expressed a couple months ago. And this amended request is directly responsive to some of the concerns and questions we had over the past couple of days. So very much applaud the work that you've done, and I'm on board.
Team effort.
Yeah, nice job. I have one quick question. I know you touched on it last night. Is there any sense of what the ultimate size of this project might be? Just, I know that nothing's set in stone, but I just want to have a sense of how big is this? Is it you mentioned 3 million, is it 5 million? Like, do we have any idea
So the
what it
original
could be?
proposal was in the 12 to 16 million dollar range, if I'm remembering those numbers. The bathrooms were in the 3-ish range. But there's a lot of other stuff we took out, from invasives to the meadows to pathway changes to a lot of this stuff. So let's see. The reason I don't have quite clarity on that is that one of the consultants actually thought that we would need retaining walls along the northern causeway. Reed Hildebrand, who I think probably knows the property better than anybody, has said that we don't need that. If you don't need those walls, this becomes a less expensive project. If I hate doing this in public, but there's a TV, and I'm about to do this in public. Monica, she's gonna tell me not to do it.
Exactly.
We are adding an initial cost estimate at the 60%, and that'll be around April, May, June, probably June-ish, so we'll have a better idea then.
Okay.
Okay, something like that. It's hard to say, and probably I don't put a number on it. It would be a fact for research.
Doesn't Ed have a pretty good understanding if you're building this amount of road and conduit, this is kind of the ballpark of what it should cost?
Okay, 3 to 5 million.
Thank you.
I think that's what that is. I mean, if
Well,
it's
I'm looking for.
start to be
Just as a-
$6-7 million for parking, then I need to be defibrillated and we'll need to have medical.
That's an estimate and it's not a budget.
Yeah.
We just helps us frame it.
If it's outside that range, I'd want to look at it, so what are we spending money on?
Well, like you said, there's the construction of a road, do you need certain things, do you not? Is there a bedrock, is there, I mean, there's a lot of things on this.
It's hard to say. I don't think Ed could come in and say for sure that there's none of that stuff there that might be causing issues. Part of the reason 23A is taking longer than we'd expected is they ran into some of that stuff in building the retaining wall. So that's coming along fine and still is going to work fine, but it's just taking more time to sort through that.
I think from a needs perspective, like this was the right first project. I think it's like great that this is sort of the only project we're gonna be working on. All focus will be on sort of this road, this loop, and these four or five parking spots, and getting people onto that as soon as possible. It's gonna take time. I looked at the Reed Hildebrand proposal, but I think with all of our focus on this, we'll get it done as soon as possible and get people out there.
What is the expected completion date?
Fall 27.
So I appreciate the reduced scope, thank you. And I'm looking at page 2, and this is incredibly helpful. On the memo that we received in our packet, it says that the proposal from Reed includes site lighting, site furnishings, wayfinding signage, and landscape design for native plantings. I don't see that on the scope in page 2. Is it included or not?
So, yes, go back, look at the appendix page there. I was trying to shorten it for discussion purposes, but all that's included here. So
Also
look on the far
included.
right side, design and landscaping to include visual screening, replacement planting, so it's all there. I was just trying to be short for discussion, but yes, that's included.
But I think these other things are in the context of the road that's being built, the parking, the turnaround and so forth. It's not necessarily like lighting on the opposite corner of the island.
This is
It's
only,
all stuff that's,
if you look at it, you should be able to look at it and say, parking. So if it's lighting, it's related to parking. If it's landscape, it's related to the parking that we're doing. This is not really meant at all to go beyond that.
Should we consider paying for it with cash?
That's a board of finance decision. I'm retired from the board of finance.
Do you have any opinion?
And can it not fall into the unused funds that we've already bonded?
are you saying pay for this design work?
Yeah. We're bonding for 500,000.
So I don't think I would ever recommend us bonding for just 500,000.
Yeah.
And I think my view would be if the design services like this 500,000 is part of a larger project that's a few million, right, and gonna
Yeah, exactly.
benefit folks, then I would say like you bond the entire thing. If we were to never go forward with a plan and just stop after the 475, we would probably not bond that.
Now, I'd say in the case of the chances of us not going forward with parking on Great Island are 0.
Yeah.
We have to have parking.
So we're not gonna bond for 500, we're just gonna authorize this 500 to be part of a larger bond somewhere down the road.
When we have the cash, we can move forward right away.
Well, yeah, sure, I think we're gonna move forward with it, right? Though there's both an appropriation and a bond authorization. I guess the point is, if you look at this and say, well, altogether, this is $3 to $5 or so million, we would bond that. Which is
Might as well
not,
make it 3.5, because they included this.
Right.
yeah,
And that decision doesn't need to be like set in stone right now.
Yeah.
It's authorized and then we can decide.
Yeah, the main thing is to put the bond resolution in place to give you the option.
Give you the option,
This does
right.
not have to be
Right.
decided.
And is there a reason this can't be, dumb question, included in that unspent 3.5 million from the original 6 or 6.5 that we approved for?
So I would
access?
much rather, in the spirit of just, not just this board, but the RTM, let's get rid of that appropriation entirely and go back to zero and come back and have an appropriation discussion. I don't want to spend any, even if it's authorized, I personally don't want to spend any more money out of that fund ever. Just clean it up and return the funds. So you're in the process of doing that, right?
yeah.
Okay.
John, I think we talked about this, there's about 3.5 or 7 million that we would probably just
Pull it.
use to reduce the amount of the, we'll pay off
The
that.
April bonding or?
3 of the 49 with bands, and then go bond out the other 46.
Okay. Last thing I wanted to say is that these discussions are not going to stop with this presentation. So one of the things that we want to sort through in the design process is a governance process for the actual construction when that comes up. So simplistically, that's a building committee, but it does give us a chance to just think through how to manage that, and not just the committee itself. What does the update structure look like and cadence look like? So trying to get a sense from this board as to how you'd like to be kept updated. You can always look at a board of selectmen or a building committee video. That's the easy part. I'd like to go a little bit beyond that and just say, here's where we are on this process. Have some in-person report to this board. Either I do it, I'll be ex officio to this building committee just because of my personal interest or something. But just to give you all a sense to ask a live person what's going on and stay up to speed on that. I don't want any more of this board kind of wondering what's going on. You should at all times say, yep, I've heard about that recently, I know where we are on that project.
Will that building committee be specific to this specific project, or
This
this
is the
project
only-
and
this-
those proposed going forward?
So it'll be quite some time before we propose work beyond this on Great Island. So that committee will be
Okay.
probably long disbanded before we have another Great Island project. Not to say we're not gonna do anything, but I think just town-wide, we've got digesting to do a lot of stuff, and this will be one of those, so I'd like to.
Well, John, I think if you're gonna create a building committee, we'll have somebody from this board join. And then it sounded like, I think, Monica, you said the 60% check-in when we would have a cost estimate would be July, August?
Sooner than that, I think, right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
So maybe we get an update when you have sort of the next check-in, like the first cost estimate.
Well, you and I talk almost daily,
Yeah.
so when it looks like there's something interesting, we'll get on this board's agenda, even if it's before the cost estimate. Any other questions for me?
This is super helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
No charge?
John, did you say estimated completion date is fall of '27?
Yeah. There was one proposal in there where they thought that the completion was going to be at the end of 2028. And I said, you know, between December 7th, 1941, and VE Day, which was April of 1945, was less than 3.5 years. We prosecuted World War II in less than 3.5 years. We have to be able to build parking on
Be able to
Great
pave a
Island
road.
quicker than that. But fortunately, we're going to do that. I think one of the great benefits of working with Reed Hildebrand is they know everything. They know everybody, they know the island, the people, the process, the regulations, the approval boards, this board, me, Monica, everything. They're going to be a lot faster and more efficient on this than I think any of the other guys would be. And part of the reason we're here now, and it feels a little bit rushed, for which I apologize, is there's just a felt need to get them started immediately. So this will go right to the RTM. I will be at a presentation with them. And as soon as we get that appropriation in place and the ink dries, they will start.
So, John, when I look at this, nothing's really going to disrupt the island this summer, right?
No, because 23A is going to be finished in the Memorial Day timeframe, which is about the same time that the Pear Tree Point Beach parking will be freed up. So we will go back to what it was last summer in terms of parking and just general access to Great Island. But this is all design work all this summer. There's going to be no construction on Great Island. In fact, with 23A finished and Memorial Day, I think the summer is going to be completely free of construction on Great Island.
Well, listen, I think if we're all staying in close contact, keeping all the boards updated, I feel like just looking at this phase 2, like we should be able to shrink an approval process of all the appropriations, like we should be able to shrink that below, shorter than 2 months.
Yeah, if we need emergency money though, and I come to you and the RTM is not in session over the summer, and one of these expenses pops up, we will need to join one of your meetings, and if it's a real emergency, I will need a special meeting with the Board of Finance.
Yeah,
So-
I
and
just
that's
want, I want to second that, because this is a super, super tight schedule. So removing some of these items,
As long, to Monica's point, as long as you guys can agree that it's entirely possible, we may need a special meeting just for an emergency expenditure. Slightly inconvenient, but it does ensure that, what, you've got eyes on these expenses, and it's as tight as a drum, and let's try it. If it doesn't work, and you find it's inconvenient, then maybe we have an appropriation to create a reserve, but I'm willing to give it a go if you are.
Well, I can assure you that we won't be spending all of our capital contingency on all the projects you're discussing upstairs, so we should have enough left.
Okay, I'll take that as a good go. Any other questions? I have to go back to my meeting, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. So why don't we have any more discussion or questions as a board about this? So I would say we vote on it and then we go back to it. Okay. So I will entertain a motion to,
I will stay to see if this passes.
to approve an appropriation and bond authorization for $475,402 for the contract design drawings, related planning design services for the Great Island Early Access Project, as outlined here.
And as the resolution has been amended, proposed to be amended.
Correct, on the amended resolution.
It's actually,
It's already approved.
it was not amended, it's actually, we re-voted on it, so you're
Yeah.
just approving what the board of selectmen has
So-
recommended.
So it's effectively the resolution that's in our packet with section 1 amended,
Yes.
which I don't feel the need to read, but as amended here. Paul moves, Jenny seconds, all those in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, so I think we went through HHR,
Yep.
and we went through,
So down to kind of 3 in a row that are just bonding, issuing what was kind of spent to date, and ones that we kind of have to get the issuances in FY26, just based on their deadlines. And that would be for Hanson Road Bridge, design, sewer I&I, as well as the sidewalk rehabilitation. So that's 321,000, 514,000, and 415,000. Moving down, Norotan Heights Fire Department engine, the total project was 825,000. 362 was initially bonded as kind of like, I guess, one of their initial progress payments, probably for their chassis. The final payment has been made upon its delivery, so it was delivered, and that leaves 462,000 and change to be bonded. And annoyingly, the kind of deadline for us to issue bonds would be March of next year. So that kind of ties our hands and forces us to issue something for it before March of next year, so we're kind of stuck with April of this year.
so does that mean that 462 should be moved into the bond column?
So if issuing notes or bonds, whichever we decide, like if we only wanted to issue bonds and issue bans for HHR and Gorham's Dam or something like that, it can be shifted over.
You're saying, so we need to issue debt?
We need to issue something.
So why
yes.
wouldn't we bond this if we know what the number is?
So, I mean, that kind of goes to maybe the discussion after the projects about why group things as a ban versus grouping all of them as a bond.
Oh, so the ones that are currently proposing bonded are only 30-year eligible?
Correct.
Okay. That's-
Yeah, but
So the plan, I think, initially was, and I don't wanna like kind of jump the gun on it, but I think the plan initially was to bond for Great Island and ban everything else. Basically to kind of smooth debt service principal coming on over the next several budget cycles. With 37 West coming on, it's a good opportunity because it's not often that we bond for 30-year issuances, so you might as well bundle that with Great Island. And so the initial plan, at least up until when we started the budget process, was to do bans for the rest of the projects to kind of keep them going. That may not still be the plan, which is fine and a doable kind of thing, but it's kind of something to discuss perhaps as we continue on. So the next two are also fire apparatuses, I'm not sure.
Engines.
Yeah, well, one's a heavy rescue, so I'm not sure if that's technically an engine, and the other is an NFD engine. So the DFD heavy rescue, there may be some flexibility on this. They're expected to take delivery on it before the end of March, I think before April. So we will have 18 months from then to kind of issue on that. So technically it could be pushed if we so choose to next year's issue, but then we're floating 1.7 million for a year, and that may not be kind of what we decide to do if we decide to kind of draw down on
It
some
almost should be
cash
like an
reserves.
authorized and then an issue, because I thought the engines were taking, well, I don't know if the rescue's the same, but they take more than 18 months, right? They're taking.
No, so this one will be delivered,
Oh, yes, okay.
and then the kind of, I think it's 18-month from the delivery when it's put in service to issue for it.
I see.
So if
Okay.
it's delivered in a couple months, then we'll have, I think it's supposed to be delivered around April,
Mhm.
then we have until basically beyond next year's issuance to safely kind of issue debt for it.
Oh, I see, okay, gotcha. I thought this was a upcoming one.
So it could theoretically wait, but
Okay.
again, it depends kind of how we want to handle the tax on fund balance that we want to kind of hold going forward. The NFD engine, this is issuing kind of a progress payment that's expected, that has been expended so far. It's a $1.1 million project, and they have thus far expended 421,000, I believe, on the chassis completion, which was done past June. And the truck should be complete in Q3 of '26. So that should put us beyond next year for issuing for the overall, but it would be a good idea for us to kind of issue for this for '21 as the kind of the initial. You'll kind of see on many of these engines, we issue that first payment, that 362 on the NHFD and the 253 on the DFD, and then kind of finish off upon delivery for the rest of the engine. Coming down to the Norotan Heights retaining wall, so that's expected to be kind of put in service, I believe, by the end of March. And that is a total of 2 million basically, that we've only spent up to this point 266,000, but they're planning to have the entire project done and paid for by that point. So that's 2 million to be reimbursed there. Pear Tree is another one. There's a bunch of these like high single expenses happening kind of at a fixed point. So Pear Tree is expected to be completed, I believe, in April. And that's $9 million just kind of out the door. So we're looking to reimburse for that. It's something that could wait until October 1st-ish of 2028, but that's 9 million, that's kind of weighing down on the fund balance, which is kind of a big ask for
Why
it.
would you do a note on that?
What's that?
Why would you do a note on that?
Why would you? Well, we would issue for it. The question is, I mean, going back to it, the plan was to note for everything and bond for the 30 years, but there are scenarios that we could issue bonds
Right.
for everything.
Can you do 30-year on per tree?
Yeah, it seems like it.
Land.
I'd have to check to see if that counts as, if it's only land
It's not
purchases.
acquiring- it's not acquiring
or-
land.
So I think we can do 30 on other stuff.
I think there
I think under
are.
state statute, the question is, do we believe
Want
that
to.
investment
Mhm.
will last that long? So can I say, before we talk about term,
Yeah.
just listening to what you said, in terms of things that we know are gonna be fully spent in the
Yeah.
next, like, few months versus those things that may not. HHR, it looks like we've got 6 million, but some portion of that, some material portion of that should come in the form of grants. That could be in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, right? So that feels very much like we need to pay them, we need to pay the workers, and that we may need to pay them before the grants come in, but they should be coming in. And you're saying it's 20% of the eligible costs,
Yep.
which are obviously a much smaller percentage of the overall project costs. So I look at those
We're
as,
still expecting 21 million in total.
It's-
State reimbursement.
21 million grants.
In total.
So, but I'm saying there's, right now, there's like 5 or 6.
Right, nothing immediate.
The other thing that falls into that bucket is like all the way bottom, the Gorham's Pond. We need to pay for the whole thing, but there's 20% of it, about 600 grand, that we might be getting.
Backwards. It's 80% that we're
That's right.
expecting to be reimbursed from the state. But it's
Okay.
money that's out, it's basically.
out the door.
Out the door.
It's already out the door.
It's already out the door.
Yeah.
And I know the grant reimbursement proposal has been sent out, or I think it had to have been sent out by the end of January. And I know that was one of those, like, you gotta get everything in there as much as possible, as right as possible, otherwise it goes to the bottom of the pile. And there's no kind of, it's a FEMA grant that we're hoping for, so it's kind of a question of if and when we'll get it.
So that's 3.2 million that we'd be,
3.6. Well, right, yes, that we would be getting back.
If we're getting it
If
back,
we're
that's
getting
what
it
the
back.
amount. Well, we don't know.
We don't know.
yeah.
That's what we've applied for.
Yes. Exactly.
Forgive me, did we wrote a check for this already?
Yes.
Everybody?
Yeah.
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 We wrote a check, paid for it with cash on hand,
Okay. And
but we have sort of an IOU in the
Yeah.
form of a
And
bond.
the tricky thing with timing again is, when it got put in service, I think was around, put in service
Yeah.
for a dam was around Halloween that time. So in terms of when we can issue for it, it's another one of those March 1st
Yeah.
of next year. So
Yeah,
it's
time.
too early in our bond cycle that it would miss the April bonding for the following year. So it would be prudent to issue something, and a note would be obviously sensible while we're waiting to know what the final reimbursement costs are, so we can kind of long-term whatever is remaining.
So if you look at 3.2 million there, and you look at 6 million-ish among HHR, and if you look at the 420 for the
Fire.
Norotan Fire Department, right? Because that thing's not delivered yet, and that's got some more time.
460,
The 421?
420.
Well, I guess that's really coming at the end of this year, so.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't bundle anything else with the two other ones. If we're discussing separating those out into bands, those are kind of the two unique situations that fit well together.
Because they're both driven by grants.
Yeah, and just timing issues.
So that would be like a $9 million ban, just from a,
I
size
think
of it.
11.
6, 7 plus 3, 2, it's more like 10.
like a 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be something like that. And the remaining ones are about 15 in that same line.
Yeah.
So in the 15, would we be bonding them if they were, if we could issue 30-year bonds for those? If we could, and we think we should issue 30-year bonds for that 15, would we just lump that into the bond now?
So There's a couple different possibilities. I don't know if you'd really, I mean, you wouldn't do 30-year bonds for like a fire engine.
Correct.
Right. There's a few options that Mark Chapman with Munis had kind of laid out. The first is kind of what we had talked about, issuing all the notes and then issuing the 30-year level debt service for Great Island parking lot. Option number 2 is really issuing bans for HHR and Gorham's Dam, issuing 2 separate bond issues, Lot A and Lot B, a 30-year and a 20-year.
Yeah, that's what, yes.
The downside to that is Lot B, the 20-year, would be 15 million or so, which, you know, from his perspective, is less attractive and it's harder to find. I mean, he says
Which
we'll sell
I
it.
don't think we would do that. Every project here has has its own little mini amortization schedule. So it'd really just be a culmination of 50 million of debt amortized over 30 years, and then 15 of debt amortized over 20 years. So when Wall Street sees it, they would just see
They just see
a
it.
30-year final maturity.
So the one thing with that,
They
and
see
so,
a weighted average life.
so option number 2 allows for both of them to have level debt still. Option number 3 is kind of what you're saying. You issue the bans for the 2 that we talked about, and a bond issue with low to high principal structure, maximizing the 150% rule per state statute, rolling up into one issue, which is 30 years low to high principal structure for Great Island and parking lot, and 20-year low to high principal structure for the other projects.
Okay.
It's a slightly wonky
Curve.
debt structure because, you know, you'll have, for 20 years, you'll have low to high, and then the 20 years will drop off, and then you'll have the rest of the 30-year issue continuing on, issue component of the issue rolling on. But it gets away from the level debt service kind of structure that we're used to, because it has to follow that 150% rule. Which is to say, if you pay like any payment of principal that you make, a following payment can't be 150% of that 100%.
Can't be greater than.
Yeah,
But if we had
to avoid
15
like a bullet payment at the very
I
end.
think I know what you're saying.
Do the
You're
opposite
basically creating a overall amortization schedule that sectioned up pro rata, you
Each
know,
year.
30-year bonds amortization looks like this for principal.
Yeah.
20-year looks like that. The people buying these are only buying a weighted average
Right.
maturity. I don't think they care.
Well,
Yeah.
they're actually really they're just buying a serial
They're just
QSIP.
buying cereal, right,
Yeah.
but they're,
Right.
you know, if it's kind of a tail at the end, it's, you know, the year 20 to 30,
Right.
it's a little.
It's like a hybrid.
It is
Well,
like
it's
a
just-
hybrid, but
But to the buyer, he's just
Yeah.
looking at the weighted average life and, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're just,
Well, no, they're just looking at cereals, so you're just,
yeah,
you're-
discounting all those.
yeah, the fact that we would see our debt service be level for the first 20 years,
Mhm.
and then it would drop down and it would be level for the next 10 years.
so I don't think it
Wow.
follows the level debt.
That's what he's saying.
Rule.
Because of the 150.
Because of the
The
150
150
rule, it would have to follow a different
Yeah,
amortization.
but the 150, that's a cap. 150 is a more
Correct.
delayed amortization structure than the level.
So, but that's like saying, you know, the first payment, so it, you know, if we're doing level debt, the first payment has whatever percent, you know, 70% interest, and the last payment has 100% principal. That flow towards more and more principal would break that 150% rule. Because if the debt service is staying static, the principal's raising over time, right? And so you would break that 150% rule. But when you're doing level debt service, you're allowed to kind of break that debt rule. But when you're doing low to high, and for whatever the reason, when doing a blended structure like this, you're forced away from doing level debt service. So it wouldn't be a level debt service. It wouldn't even be level debt and then a drop off in level debt again. It would be closer to a level principal rather than level debt service, which may or may not be a bad thing depending on how you look at it, but it's just away from what we have kind of planned.
I'd like to look at the two, because in the flat for 20 years and then flat for 30 years, the payment in year 30 would never be more than 150% of the payment in any of the
Correct.
prior year. It'd actually be less.
Of principal only, not principal and interest, yeah.
Yeah.
So it would, yeah, so those are definitely the kind of options we can.
I think what you're hearing, and maybe Mark should hear, is that at least, well, I'll speak for myself. I'm inclined to bond as much as possible in a structure that's feasible.
Sure.
And that makes sense. And if we look at the low to high and 150% rule and realize that the debt service doesn't make sense, then we can revisit it, but we definitely want to look at that option.
Yeah, for sure.
And, and try to,
And do I hear we collectively, we think as of right now, unless something changes on one of these grants in the next couple of months, we'd issue bans for the HHR and we'd issue bans for the Lawrence Pond.
and the Hanson Road Bridge?
So Hanson Road Bridge,
Or is that just a?
that's just finishing out the project.
That's
Okay.
done, yeah.
Okay.
Alright, so that's option,
Anything that we have expected grant, we ban. Everything
Yes.
else,
Yeah,
we
Yeah.
bond. And then we need to define what we should bond and can bond 30-year versus 20-year.
and it doesn't, you could also pick 25, right? Like, it doesn't have to be 20
Yeah.
or 30.
Right, yeah.
I think that's like a self-imposed Board of Finance policies. We don't want to bond stuff more than we really think its useful life is.
Right,
Understood.
So-
yeah, a fire truck shouldn't have
Yeah,
a
so,
30-year.
so it feels like kind of like 37 West and the Great Island are the two 30-year pieces.
and maybe Pear Tree or no?
Maybe,
Oh, yeah.
Maybe,
I was
yeah.
thinking that when you said go down.
I don't know.
Yeah,
How long
absolutely.
does dredging last? I guess it's a question for.
Are we getting any money back for that? No.
I don't think so.
It won't
Yeah,
last
so you.
30 years.
No?
Dredging is like every 20 years, and I think the parking lot,
Yeah.
Craig Flaherty had when he showed that it would be, I think it was underwater in 30 years.
I think it was like
No,
20.
well, it's not underwater, it's just underwater more days
Oh, sorry.
than it
Yes.
currently is. So it'd be less days than it would otherwise be with this project.
Well, I can get a list of what is typically appropriate for 30 years, and then the board can decide if any of these kind of fall under that.
And then maybe the other thing is, for stuff that we're going to bond, would we still do, the first amortization payment would be in the 3rd year?
You mean a deferred 2-year?
Defer for 2 years?
I mean, that's up to you guys.
Why do we do that?
To kick the,
We did that
to
because,
lessen the immediate pain on our taxpayers, but we're just increasing the latter pain on our taxpayers.
we're doing that because until like 11 years ago, 9 years ago, I should say, all of the debt was issued as level principal payments. And that created a very steep
Peak.
sort of
It-
a peak that we can never sort of get over, right? And so what we've done over the last 9 years is we've deferred principal for 2 years and leveled out the debt service, so our debt service is more level going out over generally the next 10 years rather than always sort of declining very quickly, so.
Right, usually when you do level principal, the debt service kind of has these
Spiky.
steep cliffs that you then slot in. You have to time the bonding and slot in projects afterwards to kind of have a smooth debt service, as opposed to leveling debt service. Which
Yeah,
is-
it sort of accelerates the cost to today's taxpayer rather
Well,
than
there's-
spreading it evenly over the
Well,
life
wait,
of the
there's two
asset.
different decisions. There's level principal, level debt service. That's one decision. We're talking about deferring for 2 years.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
separate
It's
decision.
different, yeah.
So what benefit is deferring for 2 years, and have we exhausted the need to do that? Or is the benefit of doing that now outweighed by the cost of doing it?
So
Because there is a cost.
it might be helpful, I can take a look at kind of the next 2 years and see if there are any drop-offs of principal or in our debt service that it may be more sensible to slot it in one of those years, like if it hits, because there was in '27 a relatively big drop-off in debt service, which was largely overcome by the increase in debt service, but like in existing debt, there was a drop-off. And so I'll take a look at next year and the year after and see if there's a better time to put it in. that, I don't know if that really should influence your decision on if it should be sooner or later. It's kind of a pay now, pay later question.
If you look at our debt service for the next 2 years, our debt service, just given the existing debt, is 14.5 next year. It's 14.9 the year after that. And then for the next 8 years, it's 14.
Is that from,
Did you read that right?
I think that's,
that's not including
It's
27's
60,
budget,
isn't it?
right?
What?
That's from 27's budget?
That's just the current debt that we have outstanding, excluding
Right. What you're
excluding the
gonna
ban.
issue, right, what's,
Excluding what we're gonna issue.
right.
So, talking about issuing, right, our debt service,
What was it this past year? Do you remember?
Read those numbers back.
14.5, it will be this year,
Yeah,
like fiscal 27.
yep.
Like,
If you're not including new,
Yes.
So
Before
you're
we
looking
issue
at
any
the
of this.
solid blue lines there.
Yes.
What is the gray?
what was fiscal 26 too, I'm curious.
Fiscal 26 was it
so 13
Isn't that
something.
12, 8, or 13 or something?
Yeah.
12, something.
Yeah. So it's 14.5, 14.9, and then it trails out to 14 for 7 or 8 years, right? So by deferring the principal, you're decreasing. I can send around a couple different graphs, but why don't we put together to show you exactly, like, this is what it would be. You know, the difference is about $1 million extra in debt service.
Yes, but you're also paying off the debt earlier.
Yep.
So isn't there a net present value calculation as to what's more beneficial?
There is, I think one was done at a recent meeting when Mark Chapman was
Yeah,
here, at one
let's-
of the
let's
earlier
see
ones.
that,
We can
yeah.
kind of just take a look at one of
I'd
those
like
and
to see that.
what that difference was.
Because there's a cost to it. I understand the benefit of smoothing it out.
Yes.
But it costs us to do that.
How do
We
we,
pay for that.
how do we pay the different premium, or what's the?
By not paying out principal earlier, we're paying more interest.
It's a 2-year IO.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like a different rate, actually, I mean, or does it just get pushed out?
No, it means
I
like,
mean, it's.
if you blended everything together,
rather.
rather than your average life being of a 20-year piece of paper, rather than your average life being 11, it becomes like 11 and a half.
Yeah.
So theoretically, in an upward sloping yield curve environment, it adds a little bit higher rate.
You've got more principal outstanding for a longer period of time, so therefore you're paying more interest.
And there's no additional fees for structuring it that way or anything along those lines?
No, it's just the extra interest.
It's just the extra interest. Yeah.
You do it it's a great tool for cash flow smoothing, to clear the hump, right? I like that we went to level debt service. I think that was the right thing to do, and in my opinion, that's what we should always be doing. Just the question is, when you look at all the other capital that, like, I'm looking beyond just 2027, because I'm seeing that we're gonna be layering on more debt. So at what point do we, every year that we go to structure a 2-year deferred principal, we're extending out that peak a little bit. So, there's a cost to do it, it depends on, is it $500,000 more per bond issue? Well, if you keep doing it, all of a sudden that number gets to be 2 million, 3 million, 4 million over time, gross, and then the PV of that, we can run a number.
Although, but we purchase call options on all of our debt, which is.
Understood, right, so you could always,
Yeah,
But that's a function of the interest rate environment.
So I think what we should think about is, like, you could defer it for 2 years and have your principal be in your 3rd year. You could defer for 1 year and have your principal be in the 2nd year. When you look at paying principal in 1 year from now, like if we do a bond deal in April and we say we're gonna repay some in April of next year, well, as the banker in the room, I would just tell you, you would just tax for that amount and just bond for that much less, and then you're not paying fees
on
on
that.
amounts that you're gonna raise taxes to pay anyway. So I kind of think like mathematically, you would always defer it for 1 year, because you, again, otherwise you're just raising taxes to pay for a bond that you just issued, all occurring in the same year. So you can decide whether you want to defer for 1 year, for 2 years.
I just want to make sure that if the decision is to defer 2 years, at least 2 years, maybe 1 year, that Mark can basically tell us what's the cost for that, and it's not just on this, what we're talking about bonding now. You kind of have to be looking at the expected capital plan. I mean, it's, 13 million next year, and I know we're not going to be bonding everything, right? So it'd be great to have him.
The other question is, will our budget process enable us to include in this bond issue projects that we want to bond in this budget?
In this issue,
Yes,
what gets approved in this coming?
yes.
Well, I think typically.
Probably not. Probably not, because the RTM is going to vote
Yeah.
after this issuance
Yeah.
date.
And we typically bond in arrears anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So we have to look at those projects, and so in terms of, that's why I think issuing the bans, if we have too much of a tax on our general fund, you start chipping away at $40 million pretty quickly if you have $9 million in Pear Tree Point and a couple $1 million for the fire trucks and so forth. You get our actual liquidity down. And keep in mind, Moody's, one of the things they look at is the total amount of cash you have, regardless of whether that's derived from tax dollars or bond proceeds.
And they also look at that as a function against total debt as well. So as our fund balance comes down and our outstanding debt goes up, it's impacting it doubly so.
Is there anything else we need to, we're just having a conversation
Yeah.
tonight, right?
Yeah.
We're harming
There's
Josh
always-
with questions from Mark.
There's always the thought of, like Paul said, of spending some of our fund balance to just outright purchase one of these. It's always an option. I think we're at 34 million that we ended 25 with. And it's, there are options out there. I personally think 37 West would be a great kind of thing to pay off, because it's a revenue earning piece of property that falls in line with the Board of Selectmen's vision and POCD and so on. I think it's a good story and kind of something that'll continue to benefit the town, and that's kind of what Moody's looks at as well, that we kind of follow a process and don't try to buy down the mill rate or forcibly tax to build back the coffers to make sure we have fund balance. But that is something else to kind of just think about going forward. But, yeah.
So why don't we work on, maybe over the next day or two here, sort of a set of directions for Mark. Maybe we can pass it by everybody, just make sure we're giving Mark the right set of everything so he can come back and.
That sounds good. And Jenny, I'll touch base with you looking at your kind of capital plan forward, because that does build into some of his projections.
Right, and
kind of
because
discuss
we're
that
not
a little.
gonna, I think, I have a general rule of thumb, we try not to, we're gonna tax for projects under a
Yeah.
million, right?
I-
Generally speaking.
I think what I was looking at when giving him kind of an outlook on what our debt schedule might look like, it was a blend between the 6-year plan and John's debt talk to the RTM at the State of the Town
Yeah, I think
address.
that's sort of dated already.
It is dated, so I
Yeah.
cut some of the rather
Yeah.
dated
Well, like
parts out
on
of
fire
it.
engines, like
Yeah.
we put it in the budget, but then we actually don't really pay for them.
It's true.
We don't, so that's like whatever, if it's $1 million fire engine, it's really, ends up being issued like.
A couple years late. Well, I mean, it's a few years at this point because delivery is so late.
Right.
And I think we're trying to be better about pulling those up in the process so the replacement times actually hit when they're supposed to be replaced.
Right,
So,
so it's just hard, I know it's backed up, so,
yeah.
I don't think we're gonna, well, knock wood. We've had a lot of capital, and I don't know, the Board of Ed, is also something that's factoring in this for us, right? Because the Board of Ed has, right now, under 2 million in miscellaneous capital items, and I don't think any of that's getting bonded, I'm assuming we're taxing for a lot of that stuff. But, I know Middlesex is creeping up, and there's,
Yeah.
so that's, that might be too far down the road to model, at the moment, but, yeah, it's basically just what's the cost of deferring 1 year, 2 year, and just so we know it, right? And we can make an informed decision that, yes, it costs, but this is the benefit we're getting, and yay, we do it.
Well, why don't we have them run the 30-year, for
Mhm.
example?
Yep.
With no deferral, 1 year deferral, and 2 year deferral.
Yep.
We'll run it against, I mean, the Muni curve's kind of always upward sloping, right?
Yep.
We'll run it against that and see what the increase in the tick is.
Okay. Yep.
These are all assumed rates, of course, which
Yeah.
change.
But I think when he does run it, like he did this one, I think it's good to kind of build in the premium coupons. Because at least from a budgeting perspective, one of the things I remember that we maybe did not do is we always assumed par bonds. And then we would be hit with a few $100,000 of additional debt service because of the premium.
I got it. So on notes versus, I guess, I don't think you would do this, but if you issued bonds on a project that you're expected to get grant reimbursement on, I don't know if anyone's ever done a longer term bond with an extraordinary call from grant reimbursement. So like you issue the bonds, and if you get the money, you just call bonds from the reimbursement. That way you're locking in your rate. I don't know if any investors would want that.
Be a short term, it'd be a short call, though, right?
Well, it'd be an
That's a-
extraordinary call.
It'd be an,
Yeah, I think they're usually tax extraordinary calls. I don't
Yeah,
think
I
they're
think
usually
that is-
optional.
I think that is the case, they
Yeah.
become kind of taxed at that point.
Yeah.
what do you mean they become?
I think that you,
The bonds become taxable?
It becomes,
If
I
a
know
project
it's,
became taxable, then you have the ability to go and call the
Yeah.
bond.
Yeah,
No, I mean
But she's
if
saying-
you have an extraordinary call because you're expecting, which, you know, you issue a bond that is expected to get a reimbursement, the coupon, the yields are priced to an extraordinary call.
but that, I mean,
So I
wouldn't
understand.
that be really expensive?
Could
Because
be,
the call isn't gonna be in 10 or 12 years, it's gonna be in 9 months.
it's gonna be within
So you're
a
gonna
year.
take a portion of that bond and turn it into a 9-month
Yeah.
note.
so I've
Right?
seen it
I
more,
mean,
more commonly that you would just transfer the bond proceeds to
Yes.
another authorized fund issue
Yeah.
project instead of going through the hassle
Right,
of that.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Still
Which is
utilizing-
which is an option.
Right.
Only
So
only
issue
our
the
first,
bond.
yeah, only our first 5 years
Except these
of bonds are
higher
non-callable.
than that.
Right.
We're
So
not
it really
talking
just
about-
changes like, it changes the convexity of the first 5 years with the bonds, so it's like it makes the premiums a little bit more difficult. But
I don't know if I mentioned it at a previous meeting, I was speaking to Mark about if any of our bonds were callable or.
There are,
So timing wise they
Two
are,
deals
but
that are callable.
market wise, they don't make sense to.
right, the
Um,
rates are.
They keep it,
Yeah.
he and their kind of firm keeps an eye on it in a real time way. I'm sure they have some software that tracks it ongoing. And they reach out to us whenever there's like a proper opportunity that makes sense with the
Yeah.
market. He
Okay.
describes it as like an easy win-win for the town and his firm, so when the market's right. And we're like close on some, but not quite there yet.
Do you have a threshold for present value savings that you look at?
I think it was typically 3%.
It hasn't been 3% for a really long time.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to do bond refundings for 1% PPC, so.
I mean, if you just look at his curve right
Yeah.
here, if you look at the bonds that are callable, the coupons are all generally between 2 and 3%.
Yeah,
And so right now, like the yield curve, if you look at the first 5 years, is, you know, kind of 2 to 2.5.
and you need about 150 basis points of spread between the old coupon and the new one to make sense.
So we're getting close to some of
Yeah,
them.
I know, I've
Not
eyeballed
quite.
it, but
Yeah.
not, it doesn't make,
Not quite.
not worth it.
Alright, so I'll send around, I'll start an email between the group and then we can just add to it and I'll compose it and get some.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Financial report next?
So, in case you didn't realize, today is the 10th, so we're a little bit early in the month to have kind of a completed financial report. So there are components that are missing from this, and I'll try to fill in the gaps where I can. So overall, the revenue side, this is as of January 31st, so we're 58-ish% through the year, and we have collected 94.65% of our overall revenue budget. That includes the January collections from tax collections, and that gets us to about 98.06% of what was budgeted for the year. Currently, the collection rate is 97.15%. Against last year, at this point of the year, it's about 0.5% better than the collection rate we had last year, which ended the year at 99.8%. So, the tax collector is doing pretty strong right now. On to other revenues, that's pretty much balanced to where we would expect in the 5-year average. Interest income, this 2.08 million does not include January. That pushes it to 2.32 million, so it's about a 330,000 increase from January. We're looking at about a 300,000-ish run rate month to month, but that's, I think we just reinvested 60 million in T-bills within the week, and those kind of trail off as we kind of need the money for cash flow throughout the rest of the year. So with rates coming down slightly, we will likely hit budget, but I think it'll be closer than we would like it to be, so we may just keep an eye on that. Intergovernmental, a couple things come in January and February. TAR, we're waiting to book the second payment, about 110-ish thousand in January, and I think ECS, there should be, I believe, a February payment that comes in for that as well. I know Paul probably has a number there waiting for me somewhere.
ECS or ECR?
ECS, excess cost sharing, yeah, I always get.
Last year, there was a
ECS.
payment on the 24th of January.
Right. So,
Or
we're-
ECS?
The next one's April.
Not ECR, ECS.
ECS, yeah.
Yeah.
Educational cost sharing, not
Yeah.
excess cost reimbursement, which they could have named them something different. So other taxes, we've kind of been keeping an eye on it, and I think part of my misunderstanding of this is I didn't realize that something that comes out of prior year tax collections is when there's litigation credits that take place on assessed value of homes that have paid prior year taxes that essentially get refunded out of this account. So our prior year taxes, interest and liens are all trending where they should be, but this account has kind of been hit by, there was one 104,000 to the negative of this in litigation credits that kind of brought this number down. So while it looks like it's trailing behind in terms of 5-year averages, it's really trending kind of on pace, but there's just a couple of those kind of.
So a taxpayer litigated and got $104,000?
I think it's a combined group of them.
Okay,
I don't think
yeah,
it's one.
all right.
I believe.
We probably would have read about it.
Probably, yes. Town clerk, 1.4 million or 77-ish% of what was budgeted. With January included, that's another 90,000 on top of that, so it's about 1.5 million. So she's kind of outpacing where we'd expect it to be, kind of coming into the heavier months of conveyance fees as we warm up. Building permits, 1.3 million. There is a little bit more on top of that. It's 1.36 million if you include what was taken in January. And the redevelopment projects account for over a third of that at 534,000. The transfers in happen at the end of the year. Any questions on the revenue side of things? We're kind of trending where we would expect to be on the major items, and for the most part better than we anticipate on some of the other large ticket ones. On the expenditure side, it's pretty much business as usual for the most part. You know, since this is early in the month, the debt service looks off, but it's just one that's waiting to be booked. There is, we know we're running over on our legal fees, especially in P&Z, which is kind of typical these days. We're likely to kind of see how that runs for the next couple of months and then come to the Board of Finance with a transfer, instead of kind of coming piecemeal and just kind of getting a one lump transfer from contingency to carry us through to the end of the year. So keep an eye out for that.
Hey Josh, last night during the budget discussion, there was, I think Jen mentioned that there was a limit in terms of the amount of legal expenses associated with the project that can be included in the bonding. Could you check to see what that limit is, just as we?
Yeah, it's a percentage base, and I can try to get that percentage from you, for you. I know that we were looking at that in regards to 37 West when we were talking about bundling in some of the pre-work, the evaluation work that was done beforehand, and some of that was legal work, and we're trying to not include it because it is percentage based, but I'll figure out kind of what that is.
The education expenditures are below what the 5-year average is by about 3 points.
That
Have
may,
you
that
gotten
may
any-
just be timing of a payroll or
Okay,
something
you
like that.
haven't gotten any communication from Rich as to what his projection is?
Sadly, no. No, it's likely just a payroll that had not made it in yet. And it's tough, I mean, this was put together, I guess, what, on the 6th or 7th or something
Yeah.
like that, so there weren't that many days of time.
Same for public works.
Their last surplus, they were running about a $500,000 surplus versus budget.
Public works.
Oh, education.
Education.
No, I'm wondering about public works,
Oh.
so it's like a 6 difference.
Let's see.
Snow removal?
Oh,
No, but it's actually under budget.
No, it's under budget, but I can't find it.
let's see,
It's
public
about
works.
6 points.
That's a good question. I mean, it's slightly under budget. It's where you would expect it to be year to date, that 58% versus 65%. It may just be a correction. I mean, because if you're looking at the 5-year average, we would say we're kind of on budget this year. So it may just have been corrections to under budgeting in prior years and being more accurately budgeted this year. I know Ed is going to also be coming for a contingency request at some point for salt, shockingly. They went through, I don't know the tonnage, but it's a ridiculous amount of salt. And because of that, I think their suppliers had difficulty, I think they're out basically where they would expect to get it from, so they have to get it either from the state or from some other entity, which shockingly costs about 20% more than where you would be liking to get it from. And obviously because of all the snowfall that's taken place, that's, I think he normally does kind of like a pre-buy for the year and then tops up towards the end of the year when he knows kind of how much money he has left in his budget for that. So I think he'll be coming back with a transfer request sooner rather than later, just to head off any kind of sporadic snowfall that takes place between now and the end of the winter.
I know it's not a lot of money, but senior transportation, any explanation for that?
Senior transportation. That's a good question. I know, we did increase the budget in FY27. It's based solely off of the payroll for the drivers, and it's fully reimbursed on the revenue side.
Reimbursing it, right?
So it's a net zero, but it still eats out of the expenditure budget, so we obviously keep an eye on it. It's small dollars, like you said, and it's netted out on the revenue. but I think their, I guess, ride numbers have just
Ridership
ticked
is up?
up. Ridership, yeah, has just ticked up in the past year or so, so that's why that's higher than expected. So turning on to state revenue, we kind of touched on what we're anticipating. And the other funds, there was not really anything that kind of jumped out at the moment. Kind of just keep an eye and tracking them as we go along. Onto the active projects, there's nothing really new here outside of what we talked about during the bonding discussion. We continue to get state grants for HHR, kind of sporadically coming through. I work with June over at the Board of Ed, and she kind of gives me a heads up on what she anticipates coming, but it's kind of sporadic. And moving on to the contingencies and unassigned, it's nothing that you aren't aware of. The two special appropriations for the survey, transfer, both of Great Island, the transfer for furnishings. And then kind of onto the Great Island numbers. I will reach out to Ed kind of in the next week or so, and just kind of try to solidify some of these anticipated surpluses.
This 2.3 doesn't foot to the number we were using of 3 and change.
So the 2.3,
So it's 2.3 million of anticipated surplus.
so
We've been, earlier this evening, we were talking about a $3.7 million surplus or something, right?
So, let's see. What did I say, 2, 3? Passive, 4, 6, 7, 5, 0.
It's all within the 6.5.
So the 4.9 is what was borrowed. The 4.675 is what we're recommending to bond. And the 2.3, the difference between the 4.9 and the recommended to bond number was 2.25. So it's close to Ed's number, but not exact. I'm not exactly sure where the 3 million number came from exactly.
Well, I think it's a lot of these to be spent that aren't actually going to be to be spent,
So
right?
it's the anticipated surplus from Ed is highlighted at 2.3 million. I can't say that there would be more that's unspent than that. I tried to put a buffer of about 100,000 from his number and what we bond for, assuming that he's wrong by about 100,000.
But I guess I'm confused, because we have $6.5 million that we authorized.
Right, so there's 6,495.
$6.5 million. Earlier this evening, we discussed that 3.7 of that won't be spent.
So I don't.
This schedule says 2.3.
I don't think it's 3.7.
That was the number we were talking about.
So it's, 400 something thousand of that had gotten spent on legal expenses.
All right, 3.4.
I think
3.4 versus 2.4. So there's a million.
So there's,
If we budgeted 6.5, we're either going to spend 2.4 or 3.4.
so there's 3.4 that's kind of to be spent right now, right? There's 3.3 to be spent, 3.1 that has been spent so far.
Right.
Which gets to the 6.5. Of that 3.3, I believe 2.3 of that is not going to be spent.
Listen, the question is, there's a lot of stuff in this column right here on Ed's piece of paper, which is different from this one, which we originally put together,
So
that hasn't been spent yet.
So the differential between those two sheets, because it's tricky, this is Ed's project-based sheet, this is what divided by the projects he knows he's working on, the timing and so on. And the sheet on the back is strictly from what's in the GL. So it may be this does not include what's encumbered, his may also, his to be spent, maybe anticipated projects that aren't in the GL and that I wouldn't know about. I would say his spreadsheet is really, church in this case, like these are the numbers to look at. The other is really just a fact.
Yeah, but Josh, that's not the case, because Ed's sheet right here, for instance, has like has $400,000 spent on parking, right? He has 150 for gravel, I think, and 250 for that. This was back before, when the anticipation was to use all of that $6 million to do a whole bunch of new stuff. And then, I don't know, like 12 months ago or so, it was decided that all new stuff, and I think the furniture, correct me if I was wrong, was the first thing to come, would be a new appropriation. So
Right.
that's why I think a lot of these things here,
So
like
I think that is that highlighted in
orange.
salmon. I think that
Yeah.
is what's gonna be what makes up the anticipated surplus at the bottom. So that's what's not going to be spent. Any of the orange line items, which I think encompasses all of the on-site parking, driveway, basically all of the access, some of the maintenance, some of the main house repairs, and signage and so on.
Well, listen, John said he's gonna close this up. So some of these things, like where he has, like widening of 23A, like that type of stuff, is coming out of this.
Yeah.
Other things are not, we just need this all to be cleaned up, like in the next.
Where I'm confused is when we were talking about the projects that needed to be bonded.
If I may have misspoke in the number of savings.
Okay, that's what I want to just be clear on, because I think what I heard was the 49 million is actually 45.3. And that 3.8 million was the amount under the 6.5, and that doesn't sound like that's accurate.
So the 49 million is being spent 2.5 million less than that 49.
Not 3.8, so what's the, what's the other one and change then?
I don't know what the one and change is.
I think we threw that number out.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody
I
validated it.
trusted your math.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't
All right.
know.
No,
if
it's-
suggested it.
All right, so to be
Yeah.
clear,
It's
we
the-
said earlier that the actual expenses against that 6.5 are less than half of it, that's inaccurate.
It's inaccurate.
It's two,
Yeah.
it's probably,
it's
like, the
slightly
6.5 is gonna be more than 4.2.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
that is correct.
All right.
This could be presented more clearly to show us that number somewhere here instead of trying to guess and
Yeah.
like.
Well, I think we've had these two sheets that have never equaled each other for about 2 years now.
Yeah, well, because, Ed's to be spent is project-based, it's not GL-based, and mine that gets updated is purely GL-based.
Okay.
So they're confusing to have both. I like Ed's more because it,
I'd like to add a column that's move something to a column that's not going to be spent so that at least we can see how
Sure.
it adds up.
Yeah, that's easy enough.
Well,
His is a worksheet, yours are the books.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but we can
There
have,
could be a reconciliation
But
column.
there's one large item right here, which is the 23A widening,
Mm.
where it says 720 is spent and $1 million to go.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
the biggest saving here is the remediation. It's no longer anticipated. Moving on, ARPA, we're kind of slowly coming up to the end. There's about 10 months or so left for spending. We're not anticipating that much being remitted back to the state. Most of these are for Ed. The one that's in the unobligated column, please disregard that. That was paid for and just needs to be reclassed into this. It's just for the vault security camera for the town clerk. Other than that, there's a couple truck conversions and cars, as well as I think Ed's finishing up his projects for these as well. That's pretty much all I got for you. Almost done with those.
got anything.
To accept the motion, does anyone have any comments on the January 20 meeting minutes? Okay, I accept the motion to approve our minutes of January 20th. Rob moves. Dan seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous. Special assignments. Noel's not here. As John indicated, Pear Tree seems to be moving along on schedule, on budget. Should be done in May.
Audit committee, we're scheduled, I think, for the 27th. I think we settled on the date. So we're gonna go through the 25 audit with the audit partner on the 27th. We'll give this board an update right after that. HHR, my favorite words in the world, on time, on budget. Actually, on time, under budget. We're meeting, I believe, in a week and a half. When that presentation comes out, I'll circulate it to the group, but we are right on where we should be. And I think I said this last time too, we're at the point where dipping a little bit into the contingency for, I call them nice to haves. I think Josh actually did a nice job showing it. We're running about, I think it was 4.5 million under. We're gonna use about $1 million of it for this other stuff, and yeah, good.
So not the contingency, but the savings?
So there was a construction manager contingency and a town contingency. If you add the two up, Taylor, it's like 4 or 5. We're gonna use $1 million, like evenly split between the two for these quote-unquote nice to haves. A lot of thought went into them. Talked to the principal for all 3 schools. What would we want to add if we had X amount of dollars? As you can tell from the number, we only used about 20% of it, not 80% of it. But yeah, it's just a really solid group of individuals across the board to get this thing, just moving. And we're about 6 months out. We'll have it done by the end of August.
Thank you.
And that's it. Unless you want to give me something else. Chief.
Nope. Any other special reports, anything on pension?
No, I sent you
Board.
actuary and all the report you can fall asleep reading.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I would just say, folks, just think about, like, if there's going to be a building committee created for the Great Island. So think about if anyone is looking forward to doing that.
I think I saw Paul raise his hand.
Yeah.
He did his gesture.
I served my time.
It served my nickel.
Okay, other than that, Board of Selectmen's upstairs with their second meeting. I sent you guys around like the link from their, for the meeting last night. Like, let's make sure we keep an eye on that. I think everybody, I know Josh, is there anything new in terms of new files being uploaded in the new portal?
I think there may be, that's a good idea, there may be a good idea to put dates next to the files so people see what they're new. So we try to keep it ordered by, like, separated in importance into different items. There may be a couple additional backup items related to maybe post 53 and I think the police overtime information that they normally kind of put together for the boards, that's going to be put on there soon. I may also put out kind of a PDF version since I know some people, probably not on this board, had difficulties without Excel opening some of the files. So I'm going to put out a PDF version of the overview and some more high-level, account-level details.
Is that what you sent, like right before the meeting? It looked like a
No, the thing I
PDF.
sent was just a PDF of...
This budget schedule?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. That's been put together, and the ones with the asterisk have departments or other entities who will be present, so just let me know if anyone else would want to kind of take part in the process as well.
Have we matched up Board of Finance people with our
Yes.
S&B counterparts? We have, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, Jack took his schedule, added it to ours, and so I can resend that around.
Yeah, please, can you do that?
Okay. Next meeting is Tuesday, March 3rd. That's like the statutory meeting where the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen will both present their budgets to us. And on that day, you can see in Josh's schedule he sent around, we'll talk about the bonding deal. So
Awesome.
There's also the
for your last bond deal with the existing chair, Fed chair.
Yeah. Then we go to the Rush. What do you want to say? Rush.
Okay,
Good.
I'll accept the motion to adjourn. Paul moves, Jenny seconds, all those in favor? Stand adjourned.
Thank you.